This video is for worksheet 2-7 for the class, Discovering Pre-Algebra Part 2. You know the drill. You know what you do in these situations. um, and how we do this. So go ahead and grade the first part. This worksheet is 2 pages long. So what I'll do is leave this up for a couple of seconds and then scroll down and let you grade that part, okay? So if you're in my class, please pause, grade your first 6 questions now. All right, I'm going to assume that you've paused and you've done that, and I'm going to scroll down and let you grade your next 7 through 12, okay? All right, I'm going to assume that you have paused, and let's look at how I got these answers, okay? So when we do these, there are different ways to do this, okay? There are ways that I like better than the way I'm teaching you in this class, because this class is about learning these things again. You probably saw this back in 4th or 5th grade, but you're learning it again now with the idea of proportional ratios, because that's what this whole class is. Before we go into geometry, we gotta understand proportional relationships between things, and we're looking at it in different ways, and one of the ways is this. All right, so the first thing I need to do is identify my percent. Okay, I know that that can be a ratio. 25% written as a ratio is 25 over 100. Now my other one is going to be my part and my part of my whole, right? So part of whole. Okay, so let's read it. What number is 25% of 32? This number is of this number. So this number must be my part of whole, okay? So let me get an eraser real quick, and I'm going to erase some of this so that I can put my proportion in. My what number is what's missing in this particular one. All right, let me change my color. It changed again. So this is going to be what number is 25% of a whole amount of 32. All right, so now I got to get this x by itself. With the 32, remember, I do not do cross product. I think it just confuses you when you try to do other things with fractions. But we can clearly see with opposite operation that this is dividing. So to undo it, I have to multiply on both sides. And if I do this multiplication, I'm going to go ahead and do that fairly quickly. Hold on. I'm going to get 800, because remember, I got to throw 1 underneath this. 25 times 32 is going to equal 800. 100 times 1 is going to equal 100. 100 goes into 800 8 times. All right, let's look at this next one. I identify my percent. I know how to write my percent as a proportion. It's 100. It's always over 100, because that is the total amount that a percent can go out of. So 10 is the percent part, and 100 is the total amount. Now I got to figure out my other one. So what number is 10% of? If it's 10% of this, then this must be the total amount. If I want to know 10% of my marbles, and I have what amount of marbles is 10% of 80, it's 10% of the total amount of marbles I have, which are 80. Okay, so again, it's x over 80, and to get x by itself, I have to do the opposite operation. It's dividing here, so I'm going to multiply on both sides. Those are going to cancel. So this is going to be 800 divided by 100 again, just with different numbers. 100 goes into 800 8 times. All right, in this one, I identify my percent. So I know my percent ratio is going to be 20 over 100. And my second one, again, what number is 20% of 120? It's of the total. So 120 is my total. And I don't know what the part is. Remember, to be able to set up a proportion, you're comparing two ideas, a part and a total in this case. The total amount of marbles is 120, and I got to find what 20% of that is. So in this example, the 120 is dividing x, and the opposite operation is going to be to multiply it on both sides. Those are going to cancel. That's going to be 2400 over 100. Well, 100 goes into 2400 24 times. Okay. What number is 15% of 75? Well, first let's put that percent ratio. The 15 is the part. 100 is the total amount of percent is out of. So what's the part here? I don't know. I know that it's a part of 75, so I know my total is 75. Those are going to cancel. So 75 times 15. That's what I'm doing. I can put a 1 underneath that 75. If I want, hold on, I made a mistake. In the interest of time, I'm using a calculator for some of this. I'm going to get 1,125 over 100, okay? So if I look at how many times 100 can go into this number, first off, I see it can go into 112 one time. And that's going to give me a remainder of 12. Drop down my 5. 100 can go into 125 one time again. Drop down my 25. Now I got to put decimals so I can have a number to drop down. Okay, I'm going to drop down a 0. That can go in 2 times, which is 200. Drop down another 0. 100 can go into 500 5 times. Okay, what percent of 24 is 12? Okay, so now I've changed. Now I've gone from looking for the part to looking for the percent. Well, I still know what the percent ratio is. It's going to be over 100, and I'm missing the part. What percent? That is the part, okay? Of 24 is 12. So of the whole total amount of 24, the answer, this percentage, is going to be 12. So the part is 12 and the whole amount is 24. Well, to get this x by itself, I got to multiply both sides by 100. That's going to give me 1200 over 24. Now let's do the division. 24 goes into 120 5 times, and it actually goes in that exactly. 5 times 24 is 120. Then I drop down my 0. Well, 24 goes into 0 times, so my percent is just 50%. That one wasn't too bad. Let's do one a little harder. All right, so what percent? Our percent is still missing, but I already know my ratio is x over 100 because the part is what I'm looking for, and it has to come out of a total of 100. Now, that percent is of the 80, which gives me a part of 20. So just by the language, I should be able to see that 20 is my part and 80 is the whole. Of 80 is 20. I know that there are all these things online, and if you use them, that's okay. That will tell you of tells you it's the total, and is tells you it's the part, and it will write it like this, like this. That is your second ratio. But when do we talk like this in the real world? Okay, so I don't want you to lean too much on this type of stuff. I want you to think about what is the problem telling me. If it's of 80, if it's, that means put it in context of something you know. What percent of my marbles, what percent of 80 marbles is 20? Okay, 20 is the part that corresponds with the percent. All right, okay, so I have to multiply both sides by 100. That's going to give me 2,000 over 80. And if I do this, 80 can go into 200 2 times. That's all it can do, because that's going to give me 160, which gives me a remainder of 40. And 80 can go into that 5 times, which is going to give me exactly 400. So the percent is 25%. Let's look at 7 through 12. All right, so I'm missing my percent again. So it's going to be x over 100. What percent of 50 is 5? Okay, what percent of this total is this part? So my second ratio is going to be 5 over 50. Well, same rigmarole. I got to multiply both sides by the 100 to get the x by itself. It's going to give me 500 over 50. Okay, so how many times can 50 go into 500? Well, I can tell you right off the bat, it can go into that once. Then I can drop down a 0. 10 can go into 0 times. So the answer to this one is 10%. Looks like this is our last what percent. So x over 100, what percent of 20, what percent of the total 20 is the part of 4? All right, again, got to multiply both sides by 100, which gets that x by itself, and it's going to give me 400 over 20. It's going to give me 2. 20 can go into 0 times. So my answer is 20%. 4 more. 32 is 50% of what number? Well, first, the easiest thing to identify is that percent as a ratio is going to be 50 out of 100, so 50 over 100. So 32 is 50% of what number? This is of this. So we always have to be of the total, so it's our total that's missing. This one's a little bit more interesting because now it's the x's on the bottom. Now remember, like I told you when we were just working the proportions, to get an x to the top is just as simple as flipping them. But you have to remember, if you flip one side, you have to flip the other. Now I'm going to multiply both sides by 32. It's going to cancel here. This is going to give me 3200 over 50. Let's go ahead and divide these. All right. It's going to be 6 because 6 times 50 is 300. And this is going to be 4 because 4 times 50 is 200. So the whole amount was 64, which makes sense. Look at this. If this is 50%, well, half of 64 is 32. This has to be the total. Okay? This one right here has to be the total. All right? So let's do the next one. So I identify my ratio for my percent. 20% would be 20 over 100. We should get that by now. All right, 16 is 20% of what number? Of the total. Okay, I don't know what the total is. So my x is on the bottom again. Again, it's just as easy as a flip. Now I'm going to multiply both sides by 16. Those are going to cancel out, and this is going to be 1600 over 20 equals x. Well, this isn't too bad, because I know that 20 can go into 160 8 times. That's going to give me 160 exactly. And 20 can go in the 0 times. And this makes sense, okay? 16 is less than half of 80, and 20 is less than half of 100%. So we're proportional, and that's what I really want you guys to see from doing these types of problems, is that proportional relationship. What's on this side has to mimic what is on this side. Okay, it has to be proportional. Follow the same proportionality rules. So 10 is 20% of what number? Let's go ahead and do our ratio first. All right. 10 is 20% of the total, of the unknown, okay? So x is on the bottom again. Again, we have to just flip the idea. To get x by itself, I have to multiply both sides by 10, which is going to equal 1,000 over 20. 20 goes into 100 5 times. That's exactly 100. And 20 goes into 0 times. So I know that this x is going to equal 50. So that's kind of like a fifth, okay? I mean, it's less than half. It's almost a quarter, okay, but it's not quite a quarter of 50. Look at this. This is less than half. It's almost a quarter of 100. Quarter of 100 would be 25. This is slightly less than that. It still shares that proportional relationship on both sides, and that's what I want you guys to see so incredibly bad from this chapter, because that's going to make geometry so much easier. All right, last one. My percent is 25 over 100. 13 is 25% of the total, which I do not know. So my x has to go on the bottom because my proportional relationship says the total is on the bottom because I put the total here on the bottom. All right, I'm going to flip my ratios, both of them, and I'm going to multiply both sides by 13 so I can get that x by itself. All right, and over here I'm going to get 1300 over 25. So let's go ahead and do this division. Well, 25 can go into 130 5 times. That's going to be 125, leaving me with a remainder of 5, dropping down to 0. 25 can go into 50 2 times, which is 50. So I'm done. The answer is 52. Now let's look at this. 13 is just about, it's right at a quarter of 52. Half of 52 would be 26, okay? And half of 26 is 13. That is a quarter, 1/4 of 52. Look at this. That's a quarter. That's exactly a quarter of 100. It shows the same proportional relationship weighted on both sides. Both sides are equal in their proportionality, okay? And that is the beautiful thing about proportions, is it follows this pattern of proportional ideas, all right? So keep doing this until you got it, and I'll see you guys in class.